We forage because we grow through discomfort. And today, on Awakening the Feminine podcast, we are definitely going to be foraging some uncomfortable, unconventional, and untraditional ways of how we show up in the world. And I am so humbled and honored to have my amazing Fit for Service sister, a mentor, and a woman who is in the process of foraging another up leveling of her own emotional, physical, and mental, spiritual being in the world. Adrienne Jezick, with the co-founder of the Morozko Forge and the creator of the Morozko Method. Thank you so much, beautiful, for being on the Awakening Feminine podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. I love being here, and I'm happy to spend this time with you, sharing all of the things.
All of the things. As I mentioned, before we jumped on and started recording, is my intention for today is really to have this as a platform for all of you women that are watching, and men, quite frankly, to really realize that this is an unconventional and probably untraditional way of being in the world. And that's what I love. I love the mess. I love the truth. And I love that we're going to get down to the nitty gritty of how this amazing woman has literally become not only a co-founder of the first electric ice bath, which we're going to talk a lot about that because I fucking hate the cold, just keeping it real. It's just not my jam. But I want to start off by you really sharing a little background of, between 32 and 34, that time frame. It took about that time frame for you to be fully diagnosed with not one, not two, but three autoimmune disorders that were literally, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, told that were incurable. And so I want to create the space to give the audience a little bit about those three, not one, not two, yes, audience, three diagnosis between 32 and 34. Can you share with us what those were?
Yeah. So this is coming from someone I'd never really been sick. I've not ever really experienced any major allergies, seasonal here and there, but I hadn't really gone through illness in my life. And all of a sudden, at about 32 years old, it was constant. I was sick all the time. I had gastric distress. Had heartburn even when all I was doing was drinking water. All of these different systems in my body were shutting down. I had excessive and fast weight gain. I gained 50 pounds in a year.
Wow.
And on my small frame, as someone who'd never really had this experience before, it was like alarm bells. And so, the first thing I did was go to the doctor. And,
Mhm.
they're saying, your thyroid is slow and this is going on and that's going on. And you're getting all these labs, and all these labs are telling you, you're sick, but you're really sick. You're sick because your body is attacking itself. You have autoimmune. And once I received the diagnosis of Hashimoto's thyroiditis, it quickly led to two additional diagnoses, which were eosinophilic esophagitis, which is where hives present in your esophagus. So things that I was allergic to, whether it was synthetic fragrance or botanicals or foods, were presenting as hives inside my esophagus. Then I also received a diagnosis of urticaria, which is where hives present on the outside of your body due to allergy. And so I was becoming allergic to things that I'd been exposed to my whole life. All of a sudden, I couldn't eat eggs, and I'd been eating them my whole life. It had gotten so bad that my allergist told me, like, don't be anywhere that you're going to be locked into a place. So don't fly on a plane if maybe you're going to sit next to someone and they're wearing cologne, or don't be in a position where you can't remove yourself. And this was having such a great impact on all of my life. It took 2 years just to get the diagnosis. By now, I'm on piles of prescription medications. I'm getting 2 live antibody shots for my allergist per month. I'm not getting any answers. I'm told there's nothing that I did to get sick. There's nothing I can do to prevent myself from being sick. And there's nothing that I can supposedly do to ever cure or get rid of this illness.
Sheesh. And let me ask you this, at this point, when these diagnoses were coming through, Had you had any awareness of cold exposure therapy at this point? Were you aware of it at all?
Yeah. No, I was still in the victim mindset of this happened to me. This is something that happened to me and this is something that is happening to me. And why can't the doctors figure it out? I've been to all these doctors and all these specialists, and why can't they help? And why can't they figure it out? It was very much
Mhm.
their problem. My illness was their problem. It wasn't until mm, the ice came before the change of that mindset.
Mm. Oh boy, and I can't wait to talk about how that happens. Woo
Yeah, first
wee.
ice bath. Let's have that conversation.
Well, for some context, for anyone that's out there, I want to be very mindful when you are clinically diagnosed with any autoimmune or any health related disease in the body. I want to be very crystal clear. This platform is talking about unconventional and untraditional ways of healing the emotional and the physical body. So choose to pick up whatever you want to pick up and choose to discard whatever you want to discard. And I know that we're going to talk a little bit about this. You went from being the victim. I called it the wounded maiden. Why is this happening to me? This is your problem. Figure it out. To literally taking radical responsibility from learning how to mother yourself in the way that you became the best advocate for your health and your well being. And let's be crystal clear, that process, I don't want to make an assumption, but probably had to scare the fuck out of you. Yeah.
Yeah. I thought I don't know what I thought going into it wasn't a conscious thing
Hmm.
going into that change of mindset. It was just grasping for straws. And about 4-ish years into my illness, so at about 36-ish years old, I was just fed up. I was really fed up. I was fed up with being tired all the time, saying no all the time, the deterioration of relationships, not really even being able to be present with my job at the time or in my marriage at the time. I just couldn't be present. And I had to get sick of my own shit. I had to get sick of my own shit in order to try something that I would have never tried because I am a Florida girl. I lived in Hawaii. Summertime is my favorite time of year wherever I am, whether it's Phoenix, Austin, Florida, or otherwise. I like the heat. So for me to try an ice bath, you have to know that I was at my complete wits' end. I would have tried anything at that point. And when I did try my very first ice bath, it was November of 2017. This video is online on Morozko Forge YouTube. Just search Adrienne's first ice bath. You can see it. You won't recognize me because I don't recognize that person either.
Mm-mm.
I put one foot on each side of the tub. I put one hand on each side of the tub. I dropped myself in. I held my breath. I leapt out and freaked out. Turns out that was a 9-second ice bath. And it was enough to completely change the course of my life for two reasons. Number one, the chronic pain that I was feeling in my legs just constantly for years that nothing would touch was
Mhm.
completely gone. And number two, I felt a sense of empowerment that quickly alerted me to this false bravado I'd been living my entire life in up until this point. It was the switch that needed to be flipped to say, you are not a victim. I am not a victim.
Mm.
I can do this. I just did 9 seconds in an ice bath. I am a badass. What's next? And
Yeah.
so I knew right away I was going to do it again, not that day, but I
Yeah.
knew right away I was going to do it again.
So
And it
let me
ended up being what saved my life.
and so that first experience was, you said 2017? Was it 2017?
November 2017. That was like November 5th or 6th, 2017.
Okay. And for those that you are listening, tell us like what even led you to even get to the ice bath. Had you read about it? Was it something that, and I don't know, and give me some context. I don't know if you and Jason, the other co-founder of the Morozko Forge, were you together at the time? Like, where did you hear this, and like, what led you to that actual moment to do that?
Yeah, we were. We'd been married for several years. And, that relationship was one of the ones that was deteriorating as a result. And so Jason, was working as a healthcare data analyst and was seeing what it looked like from a bird's eye perspective of what it looks like when someone goes into the medical system and specifically receives a Hashimoto's thyroid diagnosis. And then it's almost like guaranteed this is going to be your next diagnosis, your next medication, your next specialist. It's like it's all line them up, stack them, send them through the mill. And
Mm-hmm.
so he did not want to accept that this was it, that this was my lot in life, that there was nothing I could do about it. And so we both were interested. We both changed our eating regimen to be low inflammation, focusing heavy on high protein, occasional intermittent and extended fasting. We also were reading a lot of books. So Nassim Taleb, Anti-Fragile, Aubrey Marcus, Own the Day, which is also surprisingly not how I ended up in Fit for Service, but that book had a huge impact on me as a person, just as switching that victim mindset into I can do this. This is my choice. How my day ends up, how I start my day, how I move through my day, end my day, that's on me.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was also the social proof. So there were people that we knew in Phoenix that were like local yoga instructors that were just doing this in their backyards.
Mm-hmm.
And they were inviting people over to check it out. And so Jason tried it out and he's like, I think you got to try this. And I'm like, no. And he's like, all right, well, I'm going to set it up in our backyard in our house in Phoenix, Arizona. I'm going to invite people you know and love. We're all going to do this. You don't have to join, but it'll be there if you want to. Well, it's like he knew me or something because number one, I'm competitive as shit. Like you can't do anything with me or around me without me being in some sort of competition. Like we're in competition now. If you can do it, I can do it.
Yeah.
And backwards, if I can do it, that means you can do it too, which is also a big part of my healing journey. Like if I can do this, so can you. So he did. He set up in the backyard. We tried it. And like I said, 9 seconds. And it was enough to change the course of my life. It was enough for me to know that that was it. That was the answer. That was the reset. That was the passive, instant change
Mm-hmm.
that I'd been looking for because I didn't have energy to work out and I didn't have the mental space to drive somewhere and do a thing. It just wanted to show up, sit down, and breathe. And
Mm-hmm.
that's really what it does.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. So, because of how your body was shut down, literally and figuratively, were you at that point starting once you got it in, once you had that experience in November of 2017? Did you start to practice the cold water immersion more frequently and start to track and notice the difference? And my question is if you did do that, when did you start to notice a difference with your actual, like, your, whether it was if you went and got more lab work or when you were able to start decreasing your medication? Walk us through that process of, like, because I think this is important, because what you just said is I didn't have the energy to go work out. I maybe mentally and physically I was just exhausted. And so often, and I want to be radically clear on this, like, I too, me too, hi, just push through, go fucking do that powerful workout, go show up at the gym, go put in those reps, like, and push through. And sometimes, depending on what's going on physiologically, it actually can cause more harm to the body. But what it sounds like, what you did was the counter opposite, but in the way of allowing the body to heal, slowly, but in the exact way that your body needed it. It didn't need you to go put in those, 2 hour sessions at the gym. It sounds like you titrated. I use the word titration in the nervous system to really building more capacity in your system to maybe do more and show up more. Is that really kind of what happened for you when you first started the cold exposure?
Yeah, essentially, yes. Every time I would take an ice bath, I would feel better. And
Mhm.
at first, it was only about once a week because that was about as often as we really logistically could do it. For all that, it took 200 pounds of ice in Arizona, even in the wintertime. You only get a couple of ice baths out of that. So those were some of the challenges we were experiencing at first. And every week when I would take my ice bath, I would step out a different person.
Mm.
So I wasn't doing this thinking, "Oh, this is the answer. This is how I'm going to cure myself. I'm going to
Mhm.
take ice baths and then I'll be all cured." No.
Mhm.
I took an ice bath and I felt better. And I
Mm.
knew I wanted to keep feeling better, so I kept taking ice baths.
Mhm.
As I was taking these ice baths, I was realized my mind was changing. My sense of self was changing. The way
Mhm.
that I reacted to stress was changing. The way that I coped and processed emotion was changing.
Wow. And
And it was over the course of 2 years that I did do a complete transformation and completely reverse all trace of autoimmune, but it wasn't under supervision of a doctor. At that point, I became so untrusting of
mhm.
doctors and of the medical system that I very much walked away from it. And I will say, I've now found the place where that belongs in my life, which is with a lot of things like this pendulum swing.
Mhm.
Figure it out, I correct, I overcorrect, and then I have to redirect. And this was one of those practices where the more I did it, the better I felt. The better I felt, the less I needed to rely on medications, those urgent ones, the ones that you take
Mhm.
because, oh, I just had a reaction. So I'm going to reach for a Tums or I'm going to reach for an allergy medicine. And I just wasn't doing that. And then
Mm.
the more that I was taking ice baths, and keeping in mind it only took about a year for us to develop our first ugly prototype. So then I had it every day. Then I
Wow.
had, instead of reaching for the medicine, if I had a reaction, I reached for the ice. So
Wow.
even through all of this, and over the last 5.5 years of my practice, I don't love the cold. So
You heard that, everyone. 5
you
years and the
have
co-owner. Yeah.
you know that it had to have something powerful to
Yeah.
keep me coming back for more.
Yeah.
And it's all intuitive. One of the greatest things I love about the cold is it reignites that communication between your brain and your body. You start to understand this little voice in my head that's the monkey mind saying, I don't want to work out. I don't want to eat well. I don't want to do cold exposure.
Mhm.
Versus the body saying, this is what I need. This is what you're going to do. This is not a conversation. You're
I
going to
love
eat well, you're going to be still, and you're going to practice deliberate cold exposure.
I love that you said something that was an extreme profound order that I want to just reiterate that really really fully resonates for me personally where I'm at in my life is I care more about how I feel than what my survival brain has been conditioned to do. And when we can really track what makes us feel good and what literally is beneficial to our physical body, fucking game over, right? And what I love that you mentioned is that you cared more about what you felt and how it made you feel versus the monkey mind in the head. And then over time, by you showing up, putting in those reps, you literally became your message. I mean, your test is now your testimony, and you have created an unbelievable, product. And now, the creator of the Morozko method, and you are, and I'm sure you're aware of this, you are a massive force to be reckoned with. And you are changing men and women's lives all over the world, whether you believe it or not. And I know you know this. And so I don't believe anything happens to us. I believe everything happens for us. And if it wasn't for this experience, maybe the Morozko Forge would have never been born. Maybe, maybe not. But I love the fact that you brought back the feeling. And I love the fact that you brought that the cold is so profound to bring you in your body, whether you want to admit that or not. And it softens the protectors in the brain, and it brings you so in the present moment, in the moment. And, if I'm being radically honest, I think that's something the cold, as you mentioned, not liking the cold. Um, I had, resist it. And you, no coincidence, you led me in my first ice bath in 2020, November of 2020. And this was before, um, I had met you through Jason, your husband, through Fit for Service. And we were at a gathering, and there was one of your Morozko Forge cold things. And I was like, oh God, I don't want to. And you just had this presence about you and this determination and the groundedness. I want to give some context to this. Like, your ability to ground me and keep me in the tub where I was like, get me the fuck out. It was so profound. And I do believe you have a very gift to this world. And I do wholeheartedly believe this is your mess and your message. And that experience that you took me through my first cold, I'll never forget. And it was not fun and it was uncomfortable. But you stood by my side and you were there and you helped me to come back into my body. And I want to thank you for that. And I want to thank you, for really just leading this way and foraging literally this way, that you're in right now. And I want to kind of just fast forward a little bit. So after you guys had developed the prototype, you had the first electric cold plunge, and you were able to get into it every single day or however frequent that you were getting into it. And then when did the light bulb go off for you and Jason to go, oh, dude, like, we've got something here. Let's put this into the world. Yeah.
So that was all along the way,
Okay.
because as we were solving our own problems, like I said, we were meeting other people in the space who were interested in the practice and who were already practicing in their own DIY ways. And we realized we weren't just solving our problems, we were solving the problems of people around us because we were practicing. And
Mhm.
also because I'm loud. So when I first started practicing and seeing the results of this practice and the ways that it was changing me, I was telling anyone who would listen. And I was still telling people who maybe didn't want to listen. And I was still there to just be like, hey, but you have to hear this thing. Because it was the only thing since I'd gotten sick that had been able to really help me. And it was the only thing in my entire life that could help me create this kind of bird's eye vision of who I am and where my mess was, where the work needed to be done. That
Mhm.
is still the answer for me. When I really want it handed to me, when I want to know my own truth, I sit in the ice. That's
Wow.
where I find out what I'm made of. And it continues to challenge me in that way. So it was along the way. And then because I developed the Morozko method, my third or fourth ice bath was the beginning of the development of the Morozko method. And I was telling everybody in the world, I was bringing them over to experience it, and I was guiding them through using this method.
Mhm.
Now, all of a sudden, the conversation wasn't just about the cold and accessing the cold. It was, well, how are you approaching it?
Mm.
What is the technique that you're using when you sit in the cold, when you're breathing through the cold, when it gets really hard and you don't want to do it?
And so, for those that are listening, what do you tell people? So, when you guide people through that, right? Because again, I'm just going to go through my lens. When I got not cold, everything in my body was like, get the fuck out. Number one, like I went into a complete, like fight response of like wanting to get out. So, nervous system was like, not safe. Get out, get out. What is the process that when that happens in the cold, and I'm assuming I'm not the only one that has that visceral experience, what was something that you through the Morozko method really helped people to shift that as soon as possible when they got in the cold? What was it that you did?
Well, it starts before you step into the cold.
Mm.
So most people experience that fight or flight, freeze or fawn response in the cold. Some people never get rid of it. Some people practice it away. So when I, after my like third or fourth ice bath, when I was sitting in there calmly using this method, I don't hyperventilate. I don't freak out. I might complain a lot, but I'm not having any of that visceral reaction. And so it's very common to have that reaction. And so what I work with is getting you to feel into your body and feel what it feels like to be calm before you ever enter the water. So I want you to enter calmly. I want you to exit calmly. There might be some chaos in the middle. And while you're in that state, that's okay. There's an art to the surrender of
Mm,
that response. And then understanding that this is your opportunity to practice a calm and mindful presence and being responsive to that rather than being reactive to it. You are still completely capable of being responsive to that
mm,
reaction, allowing that reaction, surrendering to that reaction, and understanding this is okay. This is what cold feels like. This is a sensation. This is a physical sensation causing another internal physical sensation. And all I have to do is breathe.
mm,
Because if I can sit here and breathe, I
mhm,
will get past that first 30 to 45 seconds of this reaction. And then I'll really start to reap the benefits because that's when that surge of norepinephrine and dopamine come in, making everything a little bit easier, getting you to that 2 minute mark.
mhm, mhm. I love that you brought that up. It starts before the cold.
Mhm.
I think that's important for everyone to that's listening to this is that one of the things, and I remember this, is you made me hold this stance where my hands were on my hips and I was like looking straight at you. And you were like as stoic as it could be. And you were like, you're going to get in the cold. I don't know exactly the verbiage. I'm going to do my best here. You're going to step into the cold. You're going to breathe. You're going to dunk your shoulders in and you're just going to just allow the feeling breathing like, and you were just so clear and stoic. And I'm looking at you and I'm thinking, what the fuck is this woman saying? I'm not going to remember by the time I get in the tub. But you grounded me and you were so present that when that happened, you could hold all of that. And in turn, I was able to go from an immediate reaction back into responding back into that calm place. And if I'm being really honest, I think we live in a fucking society that has no idea how to respond versus to react to their emotional emotions. I think we live in a very disconnected world. I believe that the things that are around us are only disconnecting us even more. And we are losing our ability to really move through emotions in the way that create such awareness that we are human and we are going to go through shit, and that no amount of social media, no amount of alcohol, no amount of shopping is ever going to take away those discomforting moments. And what I also believe to be true is that, to me, I feel that cold gives you a platform to teach you to be uncomfortable in the discomfort, and that builds more capacity in your system, that when shit happens in the real world, because it's coming, and we're going to talk about that in a second, because this year has been two of the hardest things that have ever happened to you, and I want to talk about those today. I wholeheartedly believe that the last couple of years, your experience in the cold and what you've been doing with the cold has given some of you a softer place. And I'm going to use the word softer, that you talked about that on your podcast this morning. It has given you a softer place with grace for yourself. And I do believe that you are practicing more ways to have be able to hold that capacity. And this year, I do believe, was yet again another test to your testimony. And it is now here, when you mentioned, is like, I'm here to accept that it's fucking hard. And I'm here to accept that it is going to hurt. So I want you to share with the audience that, this year, fast forward, you guys founded the Morozko Forge, first electric ice bath in 2017. We're now in 2023. The Morozko method, which you are the creator of, like, this momentum, the taking off, obviously Joe Rogan uses, Ben Greenfield, like you have so many amazing voices that are advocating for this around the world. And here you are in 2023. And those two things came knocking at your door. When on the outside, everyone probably looks at you guys of like, man, they're on top. They're creating success. Like everybody's perception is like, they're a great couple. They've got this epic product. But on the inside, behind closed doors, you and Jason were facing some of the hardest shit you were ready to face. And so what are those two things this year that came knocking at your door?
Well, it was fucking chaos, Melissa. So, Jason and I aren't the only founders. There's a third founder and a third business partner. And, sometimes as we grow and as we figure out what it is we need in our lives for that growth, sometimes what it looks like is removal. Sometimes what it looks like is
Mhm.
removing things from your life so that you can get to that next stage, that next step, that next level. So sometimes that's relationships. In this case, it was a relationship with a business partner that I am working diligently towards removing myself from
Mhm.
and being more heavily boundaried in every possible scenario there.
Mhm.
And it was a substance. So, after a more than 20-year daily cannabis use, Burning Man 2022, after that, I just quit. I just cold turkey just stopped.
Wow.
And in this getting rid of, there was also the walking away from my nearly 11-year marriage and relationship with Jason. And part of these fed the other. So
Mm.
part of the deterioration of the romantic relationship with Jason is a result of the stress relationship with the business partner. It just became extreme and it really felt like swimming uphill, constantly swimming uphill. And he and I decided to deal with that stress and manage that stress differently. I
Mhm.
decided to stand more. I decided to quit cannabis and
Mhm.
slow the drinking and be more present, be more still, be more and I don't want to say more in comparison to him. So let's say this differently. I chose to be still. I
Mm.
chose to be present. I chose to remove substances. I
Mm.
chose to try to fill myself up in ways that I knew would give me the strength that I needed to get through the next steps.
Mm.
And the relationship with the business partner is still in its challenging phases, but as I became more heavily boundaried, that has been a manageable relationship. Did it end the way that I thought it was going to? No, it has not yet. So, a lot of this has been letting go of the idea of what I thought I had for my future.
Mhm.
And so here we are in this business, growing this business, having very normal and natural growing pains, also building the machine that helps deal with the stress that it brings on. So it's a nice little twofold situation there. I also believe that the cold definitely helped me in the process of removing cannabis and slowing
Mhm.
down on the other substances in my life, specifically alcohol, because it's not only flushing out the toxins in your body, but it's reprogramming your brain on
Mhm.
how to properly produce those feel good chemicals, that oxytocin, that dopamine, that norepinephrine,
Mhm.
that serotonin, the
Mhm.
testosterone, all these things that I need to get through a day and to properly move through stress in my life. And
Mhm.
towards the end of 2022, this my personal relationship with Jason ended, and it ended because I left. It ended because I left the relationship. And I
Mhm.
left the relationship because the addiction was out of control.
Mhm.
The addiction and the way that I was being treated was
Mhm.
unacceptable. So
Mhm.
the number one self-care thing that I can do for me anytime, always, is to put myself in safe spaces. Who's responsible for putting me in a safe space? That's only me. So I walked away from my marriage, from my animals, from my home, and from my life
Wow.
to put myself in a safe space. I will follow this up by saying that although Jason and I are following the formal path of separation and divorce, He has since stopped drinking, and
Mhm.
this has helped us kind of get this space, this time to have conversations and communication about things that we did not allow space and time for before.
Mhm.
This is a long, hard, challenging journey, and I'm glad that we are still supportive of each other in it. But it
Mhm.
has not come without its own devastating grief. I have been fucking devastated. This
Mhm.
is none of what I wanted.
Mhm.
I did every possible thing that I could think to do to save my marriage.
Mhm.
But the stress of the business, add in substance and
Mhm.
alcohol misuse, add in unprocessed rage on both parties, both of us dealing with unprocessed rage and
Mhm.
just anger towards what is in life and our business and our partnerships and each other and shit that we had not processed from my illness, from his growth experience, from him being a veteran, a combat veteran long before I ever knew him. But all of these things add up in our lives to create these narratives that then
Mhm.
fuel our emotions, which
Mhm.
then become the actions of what we put out in life.
Mhm.
So I fucking left. I said, better to start over with nothing, which thank God I didn't start over with nothing, but better to start over brokenhearted and devastated, but safe.
Mhm. It sounds like I'm just gonna just be real. It sounds like you became the knight in shining armor and you saved your own fucking self in the castle. You
Goddamn
res-
right.
you fucking rescued yourself. And for any women that are watching or listening to this, I think this is really important and I want to let this land. Here were two individuals, again from the outside, their company was getting national recognition from some of the highest thought leaders in the world. Joe Rogan, Ben Greenfield, Aubrey Marcus, the list can go on and on. But what needs to be clear is that behind closed doors, we never know what goes on. So, whatever sometimes we see on the media or on the outsides, we don't know shit. And I do wholeheartedly believe that when a woman makes the decision to leave what has been familiar, what has been known, and what might have some aspects of comfortable, right? Like whether we want to admit it or not, we develop comfortable patterns. When a woman like you takes radical responsibility and says, fuck this, no more, I am not safe. I am willing to leave everything that I have created to make sure that myself and my safety are her number one priority. And I want to tell you something, motherfuck, congratulations. Because
And
that,
I need to add on to this
mm,
because I didn't just save me,
mm,
I saved him.
yeah.
Because if I stayed and it continued to escalate, neither one of us were safe. Neither
Hmm.
one of us were safe. Me staying wasn't helping. The talking, the therapy, the coaching, none of that was getting us where we needed to be. And it continued to escalate. So if I didn't walk away,
Hmm.
if I couldn't be the one in the room that had what it took to walk away, I don't know where we would be right now. I don't know what else we could have lost.
Hmm.
And so, although sometimes it makes me very angry that
Hmm.
he made these changes after I left,
Hmm.
at least he's making these changes
Hmm.
because it's not for me, it's for him.
Hmm. I want to celebrate you for that because just making that statement, so many women can, through separation and through, when money's entwined, business is entwined, so often when there is a separation, it could be so easy to point the finger and place blame. But what I hear from you is that the decision not only was one for yourself, You are conscious aware enough to know. And I believe in my heart, I truly believe in my heart, if Jason was sitting right next to me right now, I wholeheartedly believe he would say this also saved him in some aspect. And the reason why I say that is because Jason actually was in my home in Bend this winter, shortly after all of this started unraveling. And I don't remember exactly how many days sober he was. I believe it was under 2 months. I believe it was under 60 days when he was here in my home. And he did a podcast with my partner, Andrew Schultz, who's 8 years sober. And to see the discomfort in him and to know like the battle that he was facing internally of letting that substance go, is not easy. And so I want to celebrate you for not only, yes, making this decision for you and your safety, also to hopefully that he's aware that this was also for his highest good, which I do believe he wholeheartedly did that. And you're right. Fuck yeah, it hurts. Like when you make a decision to leave a partner and all of a sudden they start, you know, stopping drinking alcohol, they go to the gym, they start reading the book, they start taking better care of themselves. And you're like, well, what the fuck? And it's like, there comes the rage, right? Like, let's welcome that into this conversation. I'm curious, like, the rage had to have come up even more, like in anger. And so my question to you is it how have you worked through that rage, and what are some of the things that you acknowledge about your rage and your anger? And I want to,
Well,
and before I and say this, is I want to be very clear with this context. Okay, anger for women is one of the most powerful emotions that we as women can feel, truly, when we learn to feel safe with that expression. Anger, for me, through my lens, when anger comes up in my body, it tells me that there is something that is not okay. And I have a responsibility to say, no more. So anger is my biggest messenger and biggest vibration of like, there is something in this environment that is not fucking safe. And I need to get curious of what that is. So for rage and anger for you, as this whole process was happening and the separation and seeing Jason take these steps, what was that like for you to experience that and work through that?
well, just like I had to get sick of myself with my illness, get sick of my own shit and stories about what a victim I was, I had to go through the same thing in my relationship. I had to get sick of Jason's shit.
Mm,
I had to get to a point where the discomfort of staying was far worse than the discomfort of leaving. And hell yeah, I was angry
mhm,
because we did build this thing together. We did have this home together. We did help raise two children together. And we did have
mm,
animals and a life and a public persona and mutual friends.
mm,
And I mean, 11 years together of building all of this. And we had goals and we had plans and we were working together towards it all. Hell yeah, I was angry. And
mhm,
sometimes I let that anger out in unhealthy ways, which would be shopping, eating, screaming and hollering my rage at or towards him. Even
mhm,
if I was enraged about my business partner, if I went home to him
mhm.
and express that rage to him, that's not a healthy outlet. That's
Yeah,
not productive. That's not adding value, not to him or to me.
yeah,
So, the healthy way for me to express my rage is to let it out. The best thing I can do when I feel anger is for me, because I'm a very vocal person, is scream. And I
mm,
don't mean scream like, the movies. No, no. If you don't want to hear this, press mute right now. I'm going to give you a little bit of a preview.
mm,
And it usually takes a few of those.
mhm,
But by the time I get to 3 or 4, real deep breath in, excessive yell, guttural scream out,
mm,
feel euphoric. And when I do this while sitting in the ice, so I sit
Mm,
down, I'm in the ice bath, I breathe, I calm myself down first. Then I choose to access my inner sacred rage and I pull it up. And
mm,
so as I'm in the cold, once I've gotten calm, I can access this and I can breathe in and let out that guttural scream and
mm,
breathe in and let out that guttural scream. And I do it again 2 to 4 times, not more than four. It doesn't need, you don't need to keep going with that. It's a quickly moved emotion if you allow it to move. Then
mhm,
when I get out of the ice bath and I'm shivering, this is a good thing. I'm
mhm,
standing in power pose, so I am in my empowered pose, and I'm shivering. And what the shivering does is it shakes and it releases the physical muscle memory of that rage, the
mhm,
physical feeling of that rage.
mhm. I love the part that you brought up shaking because I want to talk a little bit about that. For those of you that, from a sciencey perspective, I want to get a little clinical really quick. When we look at animals in Mother Nature, let's just talk about two lions in general. When two lions go at each other and they fight, and let's just say both of them survive, okay, they survive and they walk away. The first thing an animal does in Mother Nature, as soon as they are separated from that discord, is they shake. They literally shake themselves off. We see this with cats, we see this with dogs, we see this in our environments with Mother Nature. And when they're doing that, they are literally discharging, as what you had just mentioned, they are discharging that energy, that emotion through their system so they can go about into the world from their heart space or their body, maybe not their heart and the animal, but instead of their protective mechanism in their brain of like, oh, I need to look around every single corner because I'm going to be under attack. They don't operate that. Once they shake that off, and we in somatic therapy, we call it the discharge. When they discharge that somatic loop, they can at that point go just day to day and focusing, and that survival part of the brain softens and surrenders. And then you can just start to make, at least through my lens, when you get to that place, you can make the most aligned choices from your heart versus your survival part of your brain. And I want to be clear that when you get into that heart space, once that discharge happens, I do believe underneath that, you can experience the next emotion, which is grief and which is sadness. And when that comes, can you be with that? And can you be with that emotion? And that emotion, most of us don't want to be with. It fucking sucks. And so I know in the podcast this morning, you talked a lot about the new meditations, which we are going to link into this podcast. So for all of you that are listening and you're like, ooh, this is fascinating. Newsflash, some epic meditations, sacred rage, grief, forgiveness, and then eventually leading to love. I am going to drop it in the show notes. So for anyone watching, my invitation is to give yourself a listen, because I do believe that you are at this unbelievable place in your journey with awakening the embodiment of the feminine in its rawest form, taking away the cannabis, advocating no more, maybe financially, having maybe some financial setbacks, maybe having to move, but like, in the maiden to mother transition, the interesting thing is when we leave the wounded maiden behind and step into mother, you go through a death. You go through a death. And you have experienced that death very intimately this year. And I believe that you're still in that death. And so, for anyone that is watching, a business will go up, a business will go down, a relationship will go up, a relationship will go down. Your financials will go up, your financial status will go down. But the one thing that you have done, and I want to celebrate you, is you allowed that up and you allowed that down, and you are back now at baseline and putting yourself and your self care as a top priority. Because that relationship that you have with yourself is the most fucking important relationship you will ever experience. And I do believe you believe that.
You do.
So for anyone watching, I want to ask you this question. If they don't have access to the cold, just say if. I know they could take a cold shower, and I know they can take a cold bath. I know, like, I think April of this year, um, Huberman came out with the science that if you 11 minutes per week, if is enough for cold exposure, and the benefits, it increases the brown fat in the body to boost, core body metabolism. I'm hearing all of this and I'm like, I don't fucking care. I still don't like the cold. What would you give as a suggestion and a recommendation that if they are resistant to the cold, hi, me, Melissa, I'm resistant to the cold. What are other ways outside of cold therapy or cold exposure would you recommend for women to start or being curious or leading to do that gets them in their body? The cold will get you in the body. What else
Mhm.
for you? What else could you tell other women that has helped you to get out of your head and into your body?
Breath work, extended fasting, 48 to 72 hours will definitely help you understand what it is your body is saying versus what your head is saying.
Mhm.
Journaling and sensory practice. So when you have those days or those moments, those experiences where you just can't get out of your head,
Mhm.
practice sensory immersion. What can you see, smell, taste, touch, and
Mhm.
hear? If you're really deep in it, do 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can smell, 2 things you can touch, 1 thing you can taste.
Mm.
Um, and check your impulses at the door. When you're in
Mhm.
it, pause. When you're in it, don't choose what you're going to put into your body for food. When you're in it, don't go to the store and the mall to walk around and burn some steam. When you're in it, be still
Mm.
until you're ready to move the emotion and then make decisions and processes and shares.
Mhm. And that's, I believe, it sounds like it's been a really fairly new, also new practice for you, especially since you've eliminated cannabis and, and eliminating, maybe the unhealthy ways how you and Jason manage stress. Like it sounds like this year has been more of an unlayering of all of those coping strategies. No shame, no right, no wrong. We all have them.
Yeah.
It sounds like this year has been more of letting all of that go as well. And it's bringing you more back into your body than it sounds like you've ever been. Even more than after, even more. It's
Forced to use only these tools. Here we go.
you fucking A. Hey, here we go. Oh boy. Yeah. So, for anyone that's listening, where can they find you? Because I think it's important, one, obviously, this is Awakening the Feminine podcast. And so this is specifically designed for women, again, as I mentioned, that are, maybe experiencing burnout, they're lost, they're disembodied, and they're sick of traditional ways of being in the world that are not getting them anywhere. And they are like, wow, me too. Me too. I want to know more and how can I experience more? Where could they find you? And what would be the one piece of advice you want to give any women that are out there that are listening to this or will listen to this when it comes to your higher self today, the present moment today? What would that one piece of advice be for those women?
You can find me on the Morozko Method podcast, anywhere that you listen to podcasts. You can find me on Instagram at Adrienne_Jezick. You can find me on Morozko Forge website, morozkoforge.com. You can also find me on email. You can email me at adrienne
Mhm.
at morozkoforge.com, and I would love to talk with you and help you get started on your journey. Best piece of advice I could give to anyone: first, start with yourself. Stop, pause, be still, ask yourself what you need, and then give it to yourself.
Mhm.
Thank you, Melissa, for having me today.
Thank you so much. I love you. I see
Love
you,
you.
and fuck, I'm so proud of you. And you give me the courage to just do the next uncomfortable thing. And it's not going to be in the cold, I'll tell you that. But you give me permission, and you are a mirror reflection of like, yeah, we will go through hard things, whether we admit it or not. It's how we go through that and how it softens us more and more for ourselves first and foremost. And that's how we can show up in the world a better person, not only for ourselves, but everyone around us. I love you. Thank you
I
so
love you.
much. Thank you all for watching.